Here's what's happening.
Good afternoon. I am Vanessa Thomas with the 12 o'clock news on the street, 919 FM, and online Facebook and YouTube. In the headlines, the Transportation Association threatens consequences for gas price increases. South Taxi President tells members to hold their hands on raising taxi fares. A Clarkson Bay pastor is shot dead in Marabella after mass, and internationally soaring food and fuel prices are tipping countries over the edge. And now the news in detail. The heads of 3 associations involved in the transportation of goods and people have come together to form what they called the National Transportation Association. They are telling the government to roll back on the increase in fuel prices or face consequences. Already struggling to cover all of their expenses, transportation providers say it is hard to imagine digging any deeper into their pockets, especially for fuel. The organization is an amalgamation of transport workers, including maxi taxis, truckers, and small transport service providers. The association warns that if their calls were not met in a timely manner, there would be consequences. Last Friday, Finance Minister Colm Imbert announced that the price of fuel will increase from April 19th as the government lessens the fuel subsidy. Both premium and super gasoline will go up by $1, while diesel will rise by 50 cents. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley had previously warned that an adjustment to gas prices was imminent as a result of shocks to the global energy industry. Meanwhile, President of the Point 14 San Fernando Taxi Drivers Association, John David, says his association had decided not to impose any new increases despite the recent fuel hike. David said his association, which represents 80 taxi drivers, were mindful of the financial stress poor people were facing. He noted that taxis were operating now at full capacity, and it was just 2 years ago that fares had increased. David said the traveling public was already overburdened. In other news, a pastor was shot dead in Marabella last night after a service in the area. Kerwin Davis of Pleasance Park died on the spot, while 2 female relatives escaped without injuries. Reports state that Davis was driving his Toyota Axio out of Jack Street at about 8:45 p.m. when gunmen opened fire at the car, hitting him several times. The car crashed into a nearby drain, and the killers ran off through a nearby track. The Trinidad and Tobago National Petroleum Marketing Company, NP, is advising that their Sealots office will remain closed today, April 12th. NP says they made the decision as thick smoke continues to emanate from the Beetham landfill. NP assured that gas delivery will continue despite the closure, so customers will still be able to access supplies at service stations. Operations at the office have been affected since fires at the landfill began last week. This is at least the second time that the office had to close as a result of the smoke. International news: soaring global food and fuel prices are pushing countries across the world to the edge. Rabah Areski, a senior analyst at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and former chief economist at the African Development Bank, says this is extremely worrisome. He said with climate change, the pandemic, and now the war in Ukraine have caused food and fuel prices to reach their highest level on record. This is now threatening food security for millions of people across the world. The former chief economist says the combination could generate a wave of political instability as people who were already frustrated with government leaders are pushed over the edge by rising costs. In Sri Lanka, protests have erupted over shortages of gas and other basic goods. Double-digit inflation in Pakistan has eroded support for Prime Minister Imran Khan, forcing him from office. At least 6 people have died in recent anti-government protests in Peru, sparked by rising fuel prices. But political conflict isn't expected to be limited to these countries, and according to Hamish Kaner, a Middle East and North Africa analyst at one of the global risk consultancies, said people have not felt the full impact of rising prices as yet. And that was the 12 o'clock news on the street, 919 FM, and online, Facebook and YouTube. Recapping the headlines, the Transportation Association threatens consequences for gas price increases. South Taxi President tells members to hold their hands on raising taxi fares. A Claxton Bay pastor is shot dead in Marabella after mass. And internationally, soaring food and fuel prices are tipping countries over the edge. Do enjoy your afternoon and continue to be safe. I am Vanessa Thomas.